Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for both of you for being here. I, like my colleagues, remain greatly concerned with recent developments in both Iraq and Syria. But given the long-term consequences of U.S. operations in the region, I think we have to be sure that the administration's overarching strategy and objectives are fully discussed and robustly debated here in Congress. This is especially important given the lessons of the last decade, when despite 7 years of conflict in Iraq, 4,500 American lives lost, and more than $1.5 trillion spent, our military effort did not resolve the sectarian conflict we are now confronted with. Given these harsh lessons, and because a full-throated debate has not occurred, I have voted against the short-term authorization to train and equip the moderate Syrian forces. Before we move forward, we need to be clear on what we are asking and will ask of our brave servicemen and women, what the costs might be, how we are going to pay for any operations against ISIL, what the exit strategy is, what we are asking of our regional partners, their willingness and capability to meaningfully engage in this effort, and what our ultimate goal might be. But it seems to me the horse is ever more out of the barn. While I have appreciated the President's current commitment to not send U.S. ground troops into combat, I am troubled by the recent tasking of an additional 1,500 troops to Iraq and President Obama's statement that he has not ruled out deploying more troops. General Dempsey, I appreciate your candor. I think you are very forthcoming when you describe a complex, multifaceted, long-term effort that requires strategic patience and a situation that will continue to evolve. And you have said in the past and are clear about today saying that there are situations in which you could consider recommending ground troops. You also just described the very important role of the Iraqi security forces and the deep investment that we're making in bringing their capability back to par so that they can take on this task. But what if they are not up to the task? Could you talk about some scenarios you might envision? As you said, you only make recommendations. I'd like you to talk, if you could, about some of the recommendations you might make if it becomes clear that the Iraqi security forces cannot take this on.
Yeah, what I'd like to do, Congresswoman, is give you a kind of an unclassified answer, but promise you that in a classified session next week, we can talk about contingency planning. So if I mentioned earlier, if some of the assumptions we've made are rendered invalid, of course we'll have to have a branch, as we call it in military terms, to our campaign plan. There are look, we absolutely need a credible partner to provide ground forces in that region so that we don't have to provide the ground combat power to accomplish the task. If the government of Iraq fails to reach the kind of national unity agenda that we think they need, which would empower and encourage the Iraqi security forces, then we'll have to look for other partners in the region to assist us or build other partners in the region. But again, I would defer to a classified setting, anything more than that. I will say that since I think we agree that this is a long-term commitment. You mentioned end state. The end state is defined as ultimately the defeat of ISIL. I've actually said, including in my opening statement, that will occur when the 20 million disenfranchised Sunnis that live between Damascus and Baghdad reject that ideology. And we see some indication, just again, a glimmer of indication that that's beginning. ISIL has to continue to advance to succeed. It has to maintain momentum, and we've begun to break that momentum. And then I think we'll have a clearer picture in answer to your question. One last point. This campaign will be marked or characterized, I would describe it this way: 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, and at every step forward or back, we'll debate about the size of the step.
I look forward to your classified briefing.
Gentlelady's time's expired. The Chair recognizes the Chairman of the Tactical Air